G'day poker people. When we last left off, I just wrapped up a pretty rough cash game session at the casino. It was about 1 a.m. and I was heading back to my car in the car park of the casino. But as I was doing that, a mysterious black car pulls up next to me. For some reason, their back passenger door was slightly ajar and there was about 5 sort of 16 to 20-year-old young adults inside the car. And then I hear a young woman's voice try to say something to me, and at this point I'm thoroughly convinced that I'm about to be robbed. And it's a pretty concerning situation because it's going to be 5-on-1, so it's not like I can outfight them. Plus they've got a car, so I can't outrun them. So the only thing that happens in my head is like, maybe if I ignore them, they'll go away. So I just continue walking to my car as I normally would at a normal pace. But as I'm walking towards my car, which unfortunately is parked at the complete opposite end of the car park, so it's going to be a long walk to get there. And as I'm walking there, their car keeps the exact same pace with me as I'm walking. It was a very nerve-wracking few seconds. But they don't really say anything else or do anything else except for keep my pace as I'm walking towards my car. And then right as I go to turn into my car, obviously I didn't unlock it on the way there. I just turned in straight away. Then I hear a young woman's voice yell, "My friend thinks you're really, really cute," which was the worst bluff I had heard all night. And I could have broken a speed running world record for getting inside a car. I unlock the door, jump in the front seat, lock it behind me, boom. I'm in my car. I feel very safe for a little bit until I notice their car is pulled up directly in front of my car. I have 2 cars parked on either side of me and a wall behind me. So I'm actually boxed in here and I feel very, very trapped, which is when the craziest thing happens. I look up and I notice in the back passenger seat, there's a young, probably 18-year-old woman. And she's holding up a massive kitchen knife to the window of her car. I must have looked absolutely terrified at this point because everyone in that car starts laughing hysterically like it's the funniest thing they've ever seen. Then fortunately, after they were done laughing, they did just peel off and drive away down the car park ramp. So nothing bad really did happen, and it was pretty obvious to me at this point that these were just some bored high school students on Christmas break just looking for something fun to do when they weren't supervised by their parents, and I probably wasn't in any real danger. But honestly, who knows? They did have a weapon. If I did stop to talk to them, who knows what could have happened. Even though nothing bad really did happen, I still think I was a little bit shaken up by these events because instead of taking the next day off like I initially planned, I decided to grind some poker again, still have some of these unresolved emotional issues, and I'm noticing a pattern within myself that I like to play a lot of poker when I'm not feeling the best emotionally. So I was definitely back at it the next day. I will say though, at least this time, I actually think it might have been a good decision, at least in the short term, because the Seminole Hard Rock was running a promotion for New Year's Eve. We're about to celebrate the new year heading into 2022, and they were giving away $2,022 every 40 minutes between 1 p.m. and 1 a.m. So it was a great time to try and forget some of my problems and grind in some volume, although that might not be a good thing in the long run. But at least it was on this night, so I was in there to play as many hours of the promo as I possibly could. So I arrived to the casino at slightly before midday to make sure I locked up a seat because these high-hand days tend to be super crowded. And after about a 20-minute wait at 12:10, I got into a game of 2-5, bought in for 1,000, which is where this first interesting hand happened. We see a limp from a passive hijack, and then a tight aggressive cutoff goes ahead and raises it up to 10. And then I make a pretty loose defend in the big blind with 5-3 offsuit, and the limper calls as well. So we're 3 ways to a flop of 6-4 deuce with 2 clubs. So yet again, our absolute fishery has been rewarded by playing a bullshit hand pre-flop and flopping a straight. The second time since we've got to America anyway. I go ahead and check it over to the cutoff, as does the original limper, and then they go ahead and c-bet 10. Now, definitely want to check raise here. We really need to try and build a pot since we're over 1,000 effective with the cutoff, so I go ahead and make it 40. The limper folds, and the cutoff calls. Great news. So it heads up to a turn, which is the Ace of Spades. Kind of an interesting turn card. It could potentially be a scare card for my opponent's flopped over pairs, but if they do have a hand that's Ace X of clubs, they are absolutely never going to fold on this turn. Plus, it's somewhat possible that they floated on the flop with Ace King, Ace Queen, especially if it had a backdoor club draw. They actually have a lot more combinations of 2 pair on this turn. So I think we should go ahead and bet here, and I think we should use a larger size, to be honest. I went ahead and bet 80, but I actually think this might be a better spot spot to just go ahead and overbet, go ahead and make it like 150 just to really try and build a pot against the top part of villain's range. Whatever the case, I made it 80 and then the cutoff does call. Cool. So we're still heads up to the river, which is the 3 of diamonds, which does put out the 4-liner to a 5, so it might be a bit harder to get paid on this card. Having said that though, if my opponent does have a hand that's ace queen or stronger, I do want to maximize value against them. So this is where I decided to overbet. I went ahead and made it 300 and then the villain rips it all in for 970. A little bit concerned because we do lose to 5-7 suited, which is potentially a hand villain could have in their range, but I really don't think we can go hero folding the second nuts here. I think we're going to be chopping a lot of the time. Ace-5 suited makes a lot of sense. 5x clubs makes a lot of sense for villain to have in their range. Plus, I don't think it's entirely impossible that they wouldn't go all in with pocket aces here, putting me on a worse set with my aggressive line. So I really think it'd just be way too extreme to hero fold the second nuts here. So I do throw in the call, only for the opponent to show pocket queens. So wow, I was really impressed. A very aggressive bluff line from the villain. So kudos to them for finding a bluff in this spot, but it's not going to work when we flop the nuts. Let's see if we can keep the run good going in this next hand. A tight aggressive cutoff opens to 20. Then I'm on the button with pocket queens. It's my turn to play the ladies. I 3-bet it to 70 and then the cutoff calls. So we're heads up to a flop of queen 10-6 with 2 spades. 2 hands into this session, we've flopped the nuts both times. I think it's my lucky day. The opponent checks it over to me. I go ahead and c-bet 40. Then we get some good news. The opponent check raises to 300. Wow. I'm running good this session. I think it's very likely my opponent has a combo draw on this board. Ace jack of spades, jack nine of spades, maybe even ace king of spades, knowing people don't 4-bet in Tampa. Or they could have a worse set. Queen 10 would make sense as well. So basically what I'm saying, I think this is a no-brainer all-in spot. None of those hands are going to fold to an all-in at this point. I mean, I flopped the nuts. The opponent is taking a super aggressive line. Like, this isn't rocket science. I'm all in. The opponent does snap call. We show our pocket queen straight away. Then the opponent shows pocket 10s. So, oh my God, we absolutely cooler the heart out of the villain here. It's set over set and the board runs out. Ace of spades, jack of hearts, so they don't hit their 1-outer, and I'm actually really glad we got it all in on the flop because this run out would be a bit scary for pocket 10s. I mean, like I said, not rocket science. This is set over set and we're on the good end of it this time. Let's go! So let's see if we can keep flopping the nuts in this session and go 3 for 3. This time I'm in the low jack with jack 9 of diamonds. I go ahead and make it 15. Another loose V-pip pre-flop, but we're not the pre-flop police here. I make it 15 and I get 3 calls. So we are 4 ways to a flop. Do we flop the nuts this time? It is queen 10, 5 with 2 diamonds. So no, we don't flop the nuts, but we come about as close as you can without actually doing it. We have the combo, straight draw, flush draw. Let's go. When the opponents check it over to me, I go ahead and c-bet 30 here and I get 2 calls. So we are still 3 ways to a turn, which is the 6 of clubs. Actually kind of a bad turn. I do think a lot of passive opponents like to play hands like 5-6 offsuit and they're not going to fold when they hit a pair on the flop, right? So this just means there's more 2-pair combinations on this board. Plus, if they do have a queen, I doubt they're going to fold to continued action. So when the action checks to me here, I actually think the best play is to just check and try and draw for free and get a big bet paid off on the river. That's not what I did though. I went ahead and bet 80, which is a big bet as well. I actually really don't like this play. Looking back on it, I think checking and drawing for free is much better. I just don't think I'm going to get many folds in this situation. If it were heads up, I would like it a lot more, but multi-way, I think it's just a check and draw. Regardless, I went ahead and bet 80 and then both the villains call. Shocker, I know. So we are still 3 ways to a river, which is the 10 of diamonds. So hey, we do get there with our flush. Small blind checks it to me, and I think this is interesting whether we want to value bet or not. I am actually somewhat concerned that we're behind here. I think both the villains are going to have pretty much all the ace-x diamond combinations in their range, plus king high flushes would make all the sense in the world as well. So there is actually a fair bit we lose to here. I think it's unlikely the villains do have full houses that didn't raise earlier on such a wet board. So yeah, I'm really just hoping that the opponents get sticky with queen x if I were to value bet here, but I think that's just way too thin to bet for value. Regardless though, apparently I'm not in the mood to play poker well today. I go ahead and value bet 150 and then both the villains call. So I go ahead and show my jack high flush, and then the cutoff shows king 5 of diamonds and the small blind marks. So yeah, pretty unfortunate that we did bloat up this pot so much. I just think I got too aggressive on both streets. Pretty disappointed with my play in this hand, if I'm being 100% honest. Next up, my run good continues because I get a cheeky little bit of a free roll here. So I was just talking to the guy at the table next to me. He seems like a really nice guy. So I asked him what he did for work, and then he's like, if you can guess correctly, I'll give you $100. And he holds up a black chip. So I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going to take this free roll. So I was thinking about it, and obviously this guy kind of wants to like brag about what he does for work. So I think it's something with a lot of social prestige, and the initial occupations that hop in my head are doctor and lawyer. Maybe it could be like some type of an artist with a big following or something as well, but I thought doctor or lawyer was a lot more likely. And this guy, just from his personality, seemed more lawyery than doctory. If that probably makes no sense at all, but it was just a vibe I got. So I guess lawyer, and he sits back kind of shocked and he's like, oh my god, you're completely correct. And then he gives me the black chip. So, man of his word, he did pay off his bet, and I win a cheeky little free roll there, as if I hadn't run good enough already this session. But back to the regularly scheduled poker programming that we're all here for. So there's a button straddle on for this hand, and we see 2 limps, and then I'm in the hijack with king 10 of hearts. I go ahead and raise it up to 60. I get a call from a tight aggressive cutoff and a passive small blind, and the other limper actually folds. So we're 3 ways to a flop of 10, 9, 6, a rainbow with no hearts. So we do make a strong top pair, and when the villains check it over to us, want to get a bit of value here, I make it 75, the cutoff folds, and the small blind calls. So it heads up to a turn, which is the king of diamonds. Grouse, we now make 2 pair, so when the cutoff checks it over to me, definitely want to bet for some value here. I go ahead and make it 130, but then the small blind check raises to 350, and I really didn't want to see this. The obvious queen jack draw got in there, and being that it's passive small blind, they probably have all of the offsuit combinations, and the fact that they're a passive opponent check raising for what is effectively all in, because I can't flat here and then like fold on the river, like the SPR will be so low. So effectively they're check raising all in at this point. So I think everything that I've been saying about how tight the games are in Tampa, the fact that this is a passive opponent taking an aggressive line, everything is just like neon signs telling me this opponent has queen jack. Unless I'm getting the odds to draw to hit one of my 4 outs, I really don't think I can defend here with the king 10 suited. So I make what might be a bit of a controversial and nitty fold here, but I do lay down the king 10 on this one, and then the villain was actually kind enough to show me they did have queen jack of hearts. So there you go, they had the queen jack suited. They turned the nuts, but fortunately our read was right and we lost the minimum on this one. Let's go. Next hand, we see 2 limps from passive villains. Then I'm in the big blind with 9-8 of hearts, and I decide to check here. I actually think this might be a good spot to raise a hand, particularly if you think you are going to get folds from either of the limpers. But if you don't think that the villains are going to fold, I really wouldn't like pumping up the pot with this hand out of position. So that's sort of what the determining factor comes down to, whether I raise this type of hand in the big blind or not. In this instance, I decided to check. Close spot though. So we go 3 ways to a flop of 10-8-8 with 2 clubs. So yet again, we absolutely smashed the flop. We've been smashing flops all day in this session. We make the trips. So when the small blind checks it over to me, definitely want to start to build a pot here. I go ahead and bet 10, and then the cutoff calls and the small blind folds. So heads up to the turn, which is the 7 of spades. Not the best turn card in the world. Having said that though, the 10's still the top pair, and if the villain did limp with all the ace 10 offsuits, all the king 10 offsuits, we definitely just want to try and get value from those hands before they get scared off on the river. Plus club draws can get called on this street as well. So I go ahead and bet 25, and then the cutoff does call. Cool. So it heads up to the river, which is the 5 of spades. Again, not the best run out for my hand. My opponent could have a lot of 10x of spades combinations in their range, and even if they floated on the flop with ace x of spades, I wouldn't be that shocked either. Obviously, that hand's not going to fold on the turn. So I actually do think they have a lot of flushes in their range, and the fact that the jack 9 got in could scare away some of their 10x potentially, but being that it's a passive villain, I really do want to bet and try and get some thin value from those 10x hands, but I think sizing down makes a lot of sense here on a scary run out for them. So I go ahead and bet 40, and then we get some bad news because the cutoff goes ahead and raises it to 150. And honestly, despite the fact that we did flop trips and we have, it's hard to make trips in poker, no limit hold'em to be specific, I actually think this is a pretty easy fold in this spot. I already said I think my opponent has a lot of ace high and 10 high flushes in their range. Plus, if they did flop a full house or even turn a full house, I actually think it's pretty likely that the villain would slow play it, especially if they're a passive opponent, try and let me catch up type of thing. So yeah, I think I'm almost never good in this spot. And despite the fact we have trips, I actually do think this is a pretty easy laydown. And I make the discipline laydown in the game, and I'm pretty happy that I did, to be honest. So it was around this time that the clock struck midnight, and they had a big announcement over the loudspeakers in the poker room, and people were like clapping for some reason. But it just got me thinking, because this time last year I was back in Australia, and I was probably 8 beers deep at a house party. This year I'm drinking a green tea and making some discipline folds with trips. So it was just a stark contrast. I think I'm somewhat proud that I have progressed in life to the point where I'm, working hard and not making degenerate choices with my behavior and partying and stuff like that. On the other hand, it kind of leans into what I've been talking about feeling lonely and a bit isolated, the fact that I'm, working and not out socializing and partying on a New Year's Eve. There's negative and positives to both, I suppose, but it definitely added to the some of the feelings of loneliness I had been feeling, particularly on Christmas Day. Despite the clock having hit midnight, the promo did run until 1 a.m, so there was a little bit of time left to play some interesting hands, and this is the first interesting hand of the year. I'm under the gun with Jack 10 of clubs. I go ahead and make it 15, and then I get no less than 4 different callers, so we are super multi-way to a flop of Queen Jack 6 with 2 clubs. So brand new year, but I'm still smashing flops, middle pair plus a flush draw. When the action checks to me here, I could go either way between just checking super multi-way out of position. I think checking there's a good default to have, but we do have a super high equity hand and I wouldn't hate building a pot. In this instance, I went ahead and bet 30, but I could go either way looking back at it. And then I get 3 different callers. So we have thinned out the field a tiny little bit, and there are only 4 ways to a turn, which is the 7 of diamonds. When the action checks to me this time, I think this should just be a check back and try and realize your equity for as cheap as possible. I think it's very likely we're behind. I think the opponents have a bunch of Queen X combinations, which probably aren't going to fold to a bet. Plus, this turn does just put out more 2 pairs with the 6-7 combinations. So I check, and then everyone else checks as well. So we do get that free river, which is the 9 of diamonds. The action checks to me, and I'm just checking, trying to get to showdown. It's somewhat possible our jack is good here, but I don't think a better hand will fold to a bet anyway, or a worse hand will call. So yeah, just checking it here, trying to get to showdown. That doesn't happen though, because the cutoff goes ahead and bets 75. And then everyone folds to me, and I'm the last one left to act. And part of me is kind of tempted to call here, just because the bet feels like very stabby. It's hard to come up with a combination that didn't get there. Maybe ace king or ace 10 missed. Yeah, they could potentially be bluffing with one of those hands, but I actually think it's more likely they just have like a weak queen and they're just trying to get some value, because surely they have the best hand at this point. So will that hand call a check raise? I'm really not sure. If I check raise here, I'm not really representing anything except for king 10 specifically, maybe pocket 9s, but I just don't think they're going to call, man. A live feel type thing. I will say we do have a 10, which makes them having king 10 a lot less likely. I just don't think they're going to call a check raise. So hey, it's a new year. I'm going to go with my read. I go ahead and check raise it to 300, and then the villain folds. Let's go. They folded really quickly, so it is somewhat possible that we did have the best hand with our pair, but I didn't want them to accidentally turn over like queen deuce suited that would have folded to a raise. So I am happy with this aggressive line I took in this hand. Let's go. And that was it. That was the last interesting hand we played in the session. I was ready to wrap things up after 13 hours of play. I left 5 minutes after the promo ended, and I went to cash out my chips at the cashier, and I think I waited a bit too long with those extra 5 minutes, because I had to wait 20 minutes in a massive line that went around the corner to get to the cashier, because the promo ended, so everyone's trying to leave at the same time. So that was a bit annoying. annoying, but after the 20 minutes, cashed out, went home, ate something, then got some rest. Finally, I was very exhausted. But unfortunately, I didn't have the most restful sleep because the turnaround before the next day was very, very quick. At 10 a.m, they were starting the next high hand promotion, which again was giving away $2,022 every 40 minutes for the New Year's Day. So you know I had to put as many hours as I possibly could into that promo. And let me tell you, this next session was even longer than this one and even crazier in terms of the action. So make sure you subscribe to my channel and you'll get that new video when it comes out. Also, if you like this anti-gambling gambling club merchandise, check out my website leebets.com. We have t-shirts, hats, hoodies in a variety of different colors, so make sure you check all that out, leebets.com. But for now, I'm out of here. Peace.